Hello and good evening. My name is Kristen Rogers. I am the chair of the Harwood Unified Union School District. Thank you for joining us. We start each meeting with public comment. Anyone from the public can speak on a school-related matter they would like to. Each speaker is given up to 3 minutes. Usually, we are able to hear from everyone that would like to speak. If for some reason there are more speakers than time allows, I will draw names. At the 2.5-minute mark, I will let you know you have 30 seconds left. And at the 3-minute mark, I will let you know your time is up so we can go on to the next speaker. If you have more to share with us than 3 minutes allows, we invite you to email the entire board at cen-huusdboard@huusd.org. Please know that while the board does not respond during public comment, we do always listen carefully to what is being said. If you are on Zoom and would like to speak, please click on the raised hand button. I'll give it just another second or two. Okay, we don't have anybody in with us in the library, and I'm not seeing any hands on Zoom, so we will continue on. Let's see. So I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Second. Any discussion? Okay. Are there any objections to approving the agenda tonight? Not seeing any or hearing any. That motion will pass without objection. We don't have any board reports this evening, so our first item is going to be the discussion for the assignment from the Professional Development Committee on communication. So if there are people that have any questions or need clarification on what was what you guys read or watched on the VSBA, if you want to put your hand up, you can go ahead. Cindy, go ahead.
I actually did have one question after reading through it. I'm not sure it's something we do, and I'm not sure I understand completely the rationale behind it. The issue of blind copying all of us instead of, and to prevent us from doing a reply all inadvertently or something. I mean, I did understand what it was she said. Do we do that? Do we blind copy? Do we BCC everybody on messages? That was one of the things it said, like on the stuff that we send out, we should blind copy. Do we do that? Are
you saying, do we do that or can we do that?
I was just wondering if we do it. I mean, I don't, but I've always just done even reply all. I'm careful what I'm saying on my replying, but anyway, I was just curious. Or if we really should be just replying to you or to Kelly when we're doing a reply to if you've made some kind of a comment in the communications. And for me, that's just where it's all confusing on where we're either, I think I have to be really careful all the time. I think we all do what we say, that anything we say, we should be able to post, you know, in the newspaper or on the bulletin board or whatever. I think that's a generally good practice. So I do that anyway. To me, that was just a little bit confusing, both in the video, in the webinar and the reading the article in the book, and I didn't know.
Kelly, go ahead.
I think the idea was to so that there wasn't a conversation back and forth with the whole board having an open meeting law, so or going against the open meeting law. So I think that's why the blind CC, just so that there wasn't that mistake for someone to hit reply all. That was how I interpreted it. But
Go ahead, Lisa.
One of the tricky parts about that is that we oftentimes use the send@HUUSD email. And so is there a way that we could, I mean, you, in order to blind copy, you'd have to write everybody's email out, right?
I can get clarification from the VSBA. Would that be helpful?
Would be helpful. I think it's a really important piece in general, the way we do that or don't do that. And also, I think then, so Kelly, when you were talking about it, so that we don't avoid open meeting laws, does that, if we're operating under a BCC, then are we not at risk of having the quorum count or not count? There was a lot of the article was about the, when you have a quorum and when you don't have a quorum, which is my second question that I had after having read it. But anyway, so if you read BCC, if you guys have BCC and we just respond to the person who sent the message to begin with, then there's no way that there's a quorum then, because we're not having a discussion amongst all of us. Is that the idea there? That's what I thought. Yeah.
Christine, go ahead.
So I think the important thing to remember about email communication is that we're really only supposed to be communicating as a board for logistical purposes, right? Like, when are we going to meet? Where are we going to meet? Especially if we have to change it. If it's anything substantive, we shouldn't even be communicating by email. We should only be communicating here. And some people tend to think, oh, well, I'm BCCing, but I'm sending everyone this substantive email. That's still an open meeting law violation. It's more related to the topic rather than the, who you're emailing with. And then I think also sometimes we need to be careful about just even the conversations we have one-on-one with some of the people that are emailing the board about topical things, because then if one board member, this is where you get into that piece of one voice versus, multiple voices. And so sometimes people might get the impression that they're speaking with the board when they're having some back and forth with a board member about a topic that they're interested in, but in fact, they're just having a one-on-one conversation. So it's really more about avoiding some of those. And I think, the BCC piece would more come into when we have people that are emailing us about substantive issues. And then we would be able to respond without hitting the whole group, but we shouldn't necessarily even be responding to those. That's the bigger issue.
People responding to us or sending us information probably aren't likely to be BCCing because they're not even aware. I think what you started with, Kristen, was the main thing, that generally speaking, our kind of board emailing to each other should just relate to sort of the business topic, not the topics themselves at hand. I think that's pretty clear in all of their stuff. The other question I had to do with quorums, and again, it's quorums of committees. So like when we had our committee, we had a committee of 3 of us for the superintendent job description and contract. So that meant that 2 of us together would be a quorum of just that committee. Is that right? And so then all of the open meeting laws and all of the issues around quorums and letting people know apply, which we did. I remember letting people know our agendas and when we were meeting and stuff. I think that seems okay. Those were the things that came up to me.
Is there anybody else that had feedback or questions? Anybody on Zoom that I don't want to miss any hands. Anybody on Zoom that had any questions or comments or feedback based upon the assignment? No? So go ahead, Lisa.
I think maybe it's worth having a little bit of a conversation, since it sounds like we'll have a little extra time now, around like best practices when people are emailing the board. Because as you just said, Christine, it can be tricky when people start replying individually. I think, Kristen, maybe it would be a good chance now to introduce new board members to like what the process is. I know in the past, the chair has always been responsible for responding to every person that writes into the board which was helpful for me to know that it wasn't just like they were writing in and getting no response. But then also a bigger conversation about when is it okay to respond back, and because I don't think it's a blanket statement. You can never respond back to your community members.
So typically the chair responds within 48 hours to anybody that sends an email. Every board member should feel like they can email the person who is emailing the board. You can, don't feel like you can't. If it's something that you would like to respond to, then everybody should feel more than welcome to respond to them. Make sure though that you're replying just to that person, and again, not replying to that person and the entire board. Does that cover it? Is there anything?
I think so. And then also just be aware that, that would be whatever the record act is, that email, although personal between you and that person, can be requested and then get published into a paper or whatever as well. I think that's also helpful to keep in mind.
Anything else? Kelly and I had just kind of come up with some talking points from the stuff that we had kind of pulled out. So we kind of talked about the open meeting law, make sure that you don't hit reply all to the emails. And that, like I said, the chair will respond, whoever that is will respond usually within 48 hours. So not to worry, the person is going to get a response back. And just to be aware that, they did talk about, social media stuff, and just be aware that, community members, even if you're, might be posting something as yourself, people still look at you as board members. So just to kind of be aware as that, and what the perception might be. Teresa, go ahead.
I don't think it's just social media. I think it's also from Porch Forum or, any of the newspapers and stuff. I think it's something to think about, right? Like if you want to post somewhere about school board related business, it's important to remember you are also going to have to sit at the table with all these people. I'm generally against it. There's no hard, fast rule, right? And it's same thing with social media. I mean, there's nothing preventing any of us from having a freedom of speech, right? Like that's the thing. But it's about, I find that it's just better for everybody to know your opinion at the table rather than reading in a newspaper, right? Or on a front porch forum or whatever it is, especially if it's a particularly touchy topic, right? Or potentially controversial or whatever. I think in the past we've dealt with different kinds of ways of doing it. And I would just suggest if you feel like you need to write an opinion piece or whatever, just bring it to the table and ask the chair, can I talk about this at the meeting, and like get it scheduled so you're saying it in front of everybody and your peers are the first ones that are hearing it. They're not blindsided by something. Again, there's nothing prohibiting anybody to doing it. It's just, it kind of stinks to have somebody put an opinion in a paper when you disagree, and then it might look like it's from the whole board or whatever. And if there is, like, hopefully there'll not be touchy, sensitive topics where people are fighting or whatever, not fighting, but, strong disagreement. But if there is, then I would also recommend, the board as a whole deciding, okay, who's going to write the pro and who's going to write the con. So that way there's like some balance. You show that we're working together instead of kind of going off on your own. And so I think that's true of social media as well, but it's also not exclusive to social media. It's a lot easier to do it on social media, but I think in fairness to your peers, it's always good to err on the side of caution and not respond on social media about school board issues or in print without proper notification to your peers.
Go ahead, Christine.
I'm not sure if notification makes a difference or not. Putting stuff on social media and putting stuff in the newspaper when you're a single board member gives people the impression that you're speaking for the board, and doesn't matter if you've warned the board or not. I don't think other people are aware of that. But I guess I would like to bring up some other social media issues, and Facebook specifically, because I'm aware that there are groups on Facebook that not everyone on this board has access to, and that people on this board do have access to and interact on those Facebook groups. So by having certain members interacting and other people not having access, that I would consider an OML violation. And I would encourage the people on our board that do participate in those groups to rethink it and think about how that might not be fair, not only to the other people on the board, but to the rest of our constituents as well.
Go ahead, Teresa.
I agree with both points, Christine. I would just recommend trying to avoid publishing something that isn't. In terms of the groups, I do think, I'm not on social media, but it is what it is. But I think there's a real benefit to being in some of those groups. So there's like a line, right? Because you're hearing the pulse of the community, you're sort of getting sometimes really very raw information and that kind of thing. But so I think it's good to be on those kind of groups, but if you're actively participating and responding and things like that, I think that becomes a little dicey. It becomes like, just kind of questionable for all the reasons Christine just mentioned. And I think it's one thing to, kind of be in person at a party, and that's just what happened. And it's a different thing to be in an exclusive group that your board members can't see and the rest of the public can't see.
Are there any questions from the new board members? I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Any questions? Go ahead, Kim.
I just had a question about, I agree with what Christine said, like that would really trouble me. I'm not in any groups on Facebook, and I think I've posted twice in my life, but I'm wondering if, I also think that in the webinar, the point was made that it is sometimes a good idea to have a designated board member be part of some of the groups that might have access to information to get a pulse from the community of sort of how people feel about things. Do we have that? Does anyone do that on this board? Is that something we're interested in doing? I don't have strong feelings about it either way. I'm curious. It was just something that was a new piece of information. We're just, as a teacher, I'm pretty much never, encouraged to not be on social media. And so I don't, but yeah, so I don't know. Anyway, I would be curious. I don't know if we want to do that or not.
Does anybody have thoughts on that or opinions or any other comments on that? Go ahead, Cindy.
I think the other point that she made, though, that was a good point, was that the trouble with that is, and even for appointing to have one of us be a member of a certain group, that you get into that whole issue of groups having selective memberships, and that if you're part of a group, are you ascribing to what their statements of whatever are, just by virtue of being a member or being present at some of those meetings. So I think I would encourage us not to have a board membership unless, it's obviously people's right to do that. But I think that has to be not something that we do as a policy of having board people at various groups.
Teresa, go ahead.
If you try to formalize that, you'd wind up with kind of stinted, then the people who felt like they were free in that group would be maybe less free potentially and just move on, and then you just lose the pulse anyway. So it kind of doesn't really help. I do think it's important, though, that if you are in any kind of these groups or whatever, just don't put your opinion out there, like use them for what they are, which is an excellent vehicle for capturing the pulse and what's going on, and processing that yourself. But my recommendation would only be respond if it's factual, like if it's like undoubtedly factual, like the next board meeting is this meeting, you're welcome to join, right? Like those kind of things. Like I'm not even talking about, if it's dodgy and not proven in fact, and I wouldn't even respond. I mean, I think again, I see a lot of value in being those kind of groups, but I just don't think board members should respond.
Yeah, but I don't think you necessarily have to be a member of the group to get the advantage of knowing what they're representing or not representing. You can listen. I mean, the social platforms that they have are open platforms for the most part, or those that are open platforms are the ones that we would have the most interest in. And I think the woman who did the webinar was just saying, just don't respond. You don't have to be contributing to the conversation. You can just hear what the conversation is and get that benefit of knowing at least what that organization is proposing.
Now that it seems like Cindy knows more about Facebook than I do.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I think this is a really interesting conversation, and it actually kind of brings me back to back when we were doing those forums about pre-K through 12 redesign before I was even a board member, and there was off social media, group meetings, and it was actually really, I as a community member was attending. It was really helpful to have some board members there, and they did answer questions, which that is an interesting thought about whether they should have been or not. But I think that it was a good opportunity for them, and there was people on both sides of the kind of argument attending. And I think it is a good way to get a pulse. So yeah, I get your point, and I think that it's maybe comes down to whether it's a public, anyone can be listening or not. And if it can be anyone can be listening, that feels totally legit. And if it feels like it's a closed group that not everyone has access to, then there's maybe some problems.
Christine, go ahead.
And then I think the problem with some of those was that they were closed groups and not everyone was invited. So unless you have those board members attending that have let the whole board know that they're going to be there and their plan is to gather information and report back, is different than going and participating as an individual board member in that meeting.
Kristen, I have a point.
Go ahead, Jonathan. I saw your hand. Go ahead.
I mean, I get it and all that, but nowhere in anything I signed or agreed to did it say that I lose my opinion as a citizen when I join the board. If I have something to say about a topic that's my personal opinion outside of the board's business, I'm not going to resist. I'm not going to restrict that for myself. And if I get in trouble, that's up to me. But I'm definitely going to say what I want to say when I want to say it. That's it.
All right, go ahead.
So a few thoughts. Obviously, Jonathan's right. You didn't sign something saying that you're going to say that. The only thing is, when you do have a personal opinion, I think it's important to make it clear that that is your personal opinion. So thought number one. I don't think we should join social media groups because, like Teresa said, there's a really good point of we might make some members feel uncomfortable and they might leave, and then that kind of destroys the point. Also, the thing is if we join one group, but we don't join another just because we don't know about it or something, then that other group then feels like they're at a disadvantage because they don't have a board member in there. And I think it could just open a whole can of worms that we don't want to deal with. But I do hear Lisa's point that it'd be nice to do a forum. So if we get a topic that we really want the pulse of the public in a casual setting, it was suggested and kind of talked about in the video that we could have a meeting where it's not a school board meeting, but it's a time where we're all available to talk and mingle and hear everybody in an informal fashion. And I think that would be the best way to go about it, not joining any social media groups.
Wait, Marlena, do you want to go ahead? Saw your hand up.
I do. A couple of clarifying questions, and one statement too. I feel like first of all, it's all being said very vaguely, like which groups and whatnot. So it's hard to really grasp when everyone's speaking so vaguely. But to give an example from my point of clarity, there's spaces on Facebook or social media and that are in person that are considered affinity spaces. And there's spaces that where people can come and be themselves and not be seen as a board member. Are you saying that, or sometimes even talking about their experience? There's a group, for example, that get together sometimes informally, or small groups that get together and talk about their experience being on the board as a BIPOC person. And that's an experience that not needs to be open to everyone. There's certain affinity spaces. So in that regard, with the different affinity spaces, is that what you're talking about as well?
Go ahead, Tori.
Anybody is welcome to correct me, but when I'm talking about Facebook groups that we should or shouldn't join as a board member, I'm thinking of like, if there's a parents group of all the kindergartners in the district or something like that, that is very obviously connected directly with the school. Or
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I just kind of also want to add that, you know, we are elected representatives also. And for instance, when the Warren Select Board asked me and Jonathan to come to the board to discuss the bond, that was part of my representation of Warren. And I was not going to restrict my speech and what I thought about that topic as a member of the town of Warren and as a representative of the town of Warren. And I don't care what anybody else thinks. I only care about what the people of Warren think. And I want to make sure they know what their representative is pushing or fighting or whatever. And I will do that online. I will do that via Zoom. I'll do that at the select board meeting. I don't understand why anybody would restrict any representative's voice. You don't hear senators, US representatives, geez, any Maxine Grad, our state representative, they say what they want to say based on the fact that they're representatives of a group of people that elected them. And those people that elected them sometimes want to hear what their representatives think. So I'm not really into this whole idea of we can't talk about it if we're not at the board. I'm an autonomous individual that happens to be on a board. And I'm not going to run around talking about I'm the head of the board and what I say goes, but I'm happy and willing to say my opinion on any range of topics that affects the school district as a representative of Warren, and then also as a member of the board. And I think that this is kind of getting away from away to the idea that what the board can't talk unless we're convened. I really don't buy that. And I'm probably not going to pay attention to any of that.
You said then, Christine.
I think one of the fundamental differences is that the town of Warren invited you to a warned meeting to speak in your capacity as a board member. It would be the same if any of us were invited to anywhere to speak in the capacity as a board member. You know, I could go to Facein Town Hall and speak in my capacity as a board member. And that's certainly, absolutely, we all have our own opinions. We also have the First Amendment. So Jonathan, you're absolutely right. You can go on any social media and say whatever you want. It is whenever you want. I think the one difference here is that in certain social media groups, if others don't have access, once you take the oath, you're a board member. There's no like, oh, I'm speaking as a parent, I'm speaking as a citizen. You took an oath, you were a board member. And so your voice is the board member. And so unless you are making it very clear, and I imagine in some of those groups, Jonathan, it's pretty obvious, right? That it's your opinion, not necessarily the board's, but unless you're making it very clear, then that it's just your opinion, then it can cause problems for the board. And that's one of the things we're trying to avoid. And then, the other side of it is that if it is a closed group, like the parents of the sixth graders at Facein or whatever that is, I certainly can have conversations with them because I'm friends with them. My kids play sports with them or whatever. But if it's going to become more of a board matter, if they want my opinion, I'm absolutely going to share my opinion with them. I'm absolutely going to listen to what they have because I am a representative, not just of them. I would listen to anybody at the soccer field, even if they go to, Waterbury or, wherever they go. You just got a bigger megaphone, right? And so like when you've taken the oath, you have a bigger megaphone. And it's not saying don't do it and it's absolutely illegal and you're going to get in trouble and you're going to get hand slapped. There's nothing to get rid of a board member in the statutes in Vermont. There's no way a board member can get thrown out. People have looked into it. And so like, there's nothing we can do, but it is all just about respecting your peers, making sure the public understands where you're coming from, making the public sure that the public understands that this is your opinion, and really just being able to work together professionally and making sure that it's easy to work, together professionally.
Yeah, I was going to say, so collegiality, it's nice to have a little courtesy for your fellow board members. And if you're going to go talk to the select board, maybe let them know. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that the only place a board member has authority is in the boardroom. That said, I don't think you can go, well, now I'm talking as a board member and now I'm talking as a parent. You are always a board member, right? You've been elected to fill a role and people are always going to see you as a board member, even though, you're saying I'm a Warren taxpayer or I'm a Waitsfield parent or I'm a Facein parent. Like you're still a board member. I'm losing my other thought. But the other thing to keep in mind is that we're also supposed to represent all of our taxpayers and all of our students. So while we're elected from our individual towns, we do have a responsibility to everyone. And I think that's important to keep in mind. And that doesn't really relate to social media so much, but it's just a philosophy of board membership.
Does anybody else have any questions, comments, clarifying anything? Did I miss anybody else on Zoom? Ashley, you good? Okay, so does everybody feel good with the discussion? Any lingering anything? Feel good? Yeah, okay. So next we have a few action items. So the first action item is going to approve the vacancy procedures. I did those changes or not changes or added from the last meeting. So we'd be looking for a motion on this. Ed, Lisa?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes to the HUUSD board vacancy procedures.
Is there a second? Discussion. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Christine, go ahead.
I have a question. It's not really related to this per se, but more given our situation, right? From with Teresa's email last night, and it's the vacancy is immediately advertised. So we'll be moving forward with advertising that vacancy. I would assume in the hopes that we could have continuity and not have a break if possible, right? Yes.
Yes. Working on it, hopefully. So is there any other discussion? Go ahead, Kim.
I just have a quick question because I'm new. Is there somebody that could summarize the changes? I don't know what was before. I only saw what was after. And so if someone could clarify what got changed, that would be great.
So number 3 was added. So it's when a board member resigns, there'll be a section added to the agenda titled Board Resignation. The board member's name will be listed along with the town they represent, the date of resignation, and the amount of time the individual has served on the board. That's so that the public is aware and anybody else who reads the agenda is aware. The other thing that was added was to not only notify, I think it was the select board chair, but I think town clerk, number 4, the select board chair and town clerk in the town of residency of the resigned member. And then there was the word and or the word or that was added in some places for like HUUSD central office or board chair or superintendent or board chair. So it was little things like that. Nothing major. The only major thing I think was the number 3 that was added.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody on Zoom? I don't want to miss any hands. Anybody on Zoom? Questions, comments, or discussion, I should say. Okay. Okay, do people feel ready to vote on this? As we bring up the tally sheet. Okay. And we're bringing that up. Be just 1 second. So then what will happen is then I'll contact the central office if this is approved and they'll make the changes, I think, on the official document, I think is how it'll go. Okay, so Jonathan Young, we'll start in the middle. Jonathan Young, how would you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Lisa. Marlena.
Yes.
Teresa. Tori. Kim.
Yes.
Kelly. Ashley.
Yes.
Bobby's at Christine.
Yes.
And Cindy. Okay. So that will pass. Okay, so the next one is the next action item is the HUUSD board communication structure process document that we also discussed at the last meeting. I would be looking for a motion for that.
So move.
You like your motion to say?
I tried. I would like to make a motion to approve the HUUSD communication structure.
Is there a second? Okay. Discussion. Anybody have discussion, comments, feedback? Anything? Okay. So if we're all good, we can go ahead and vote on that. Jonathan.
Yes.
Lisa. Yes. Marlena.
Yes.
Teresa. Tori. Kim.
Yes.
Kelly. Ashley.
Yes.
Christine. And Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, great. That's going to pass. So I'll make sure to again contact the central office to see about making sure those changes and wherever it needs to be posted. So our last action item is to approve warning of policy D6 substitute teachers so that we can adopt that on the 5/25 meeting. So in the leadership report, I had put a link to the existing language. Did everybody get a chance to look at that? And kind of compare? Okay. So Sorry. So I would be looking for a motion to approve warning of policy D6.
I'll move.
Do I see a second or hear a second? Discussion. Are there any discussion on this? Anybody in Zoom discussion? No? Okay. Okay, so we'll go ahead and vote on that. Just one second. We'll bring up a tally sheet. Just there we go. Christine, is that motion good for you up that says just approve the policy of D6?
Let me just look at what you have there. All right, how about approve warning of policy D6 for 5/25/22 meeting of policy D6 for 5/25/22 meeting.
And there was a second on that, correct? Okay. Is there any objection to approve the warning of policy D6 for 5/25/22? Any objection? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any, that motion will be approved without objection. So the next thing is the consent agenda. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'd like to request that we remove the minutes from the April 13th meeting from the consent agenda to look at that for just a modification.
Motion.
You don't need a motion to
You-
remove something from the consent. If one person wants something removed from the consent agenda, you can do it because then it's no longer a consent agenda because consent applies, everyone agrees, right?
Okay, so. No, not, it's the minute, it's the meeting, is it? Separate, so we will approve the consent agenda minus the April 13th minutes. Do I have a motion for that? Okay. Second. Is there any discussion before we approve the consent agenda minus the April 13th? Okay. Not seeing any or hearing any objection, that motion to approve that will pass without objection. So Lisa, go ahead.
I don't know if it would be like a motion that I'm making, but so I just noticed that on those minutes, the administrators Sarah Schoolcraft and Kaya Korb were listed as public present instead of administrators present. So I thought we should change that before publishing it or making it official.
So is there a motion to, do we just do a new motion to add those? How does that work, Christine?
I move that we approve the April 13th minutes with the suggested edits.
Okay, thank you. And is there any discussion on approving that with the with those edits? Approve minutes Go ahead. Sorry, Christine.
Approve the April 13th minutes.
We're just working on the tally sheet. I hope everybody had a really great April break and that they enjoyed that glimpse of winter last week. It was, stop it.
I've always these situations, we should have some really intense music, you know, like the Mission Impossible music or Jeopardy music.
Yeah. So Maisie, how much snow are we supposed to be getting? Oh, so everybody can hear.
2 to 5 inches apparently in the mountains. I'm not sure what that means down low, but
Are the ski resorts closed now?
I think Sugarbush is still open for another day or two. Oh, are they open this weekend? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Bolton's closed. Those are the only places I ski.
Did anybody ski last Tuesday? Yes, Lisa. And how was that?
Literally the worst skiing of my life. Like it was so bad.
How, because of this, like that, was it the snow was so wet?
Oh yeah, it was so wet and heavy. And then there was this crust over it. So you sunk into the crust and then you couldn't turn.
No, was the ski area busy that day?
No, because it was just skimming. It wasn't open.
Oh my gosh.
Just as an aside, sometimes if people have stuff like that, that's like really kind of minor
Yeah.
on the minutes, sometimes it just is easier to email offline and then fix it ahead of, like get everyone
Okay.
an update beforehand. So
I did do that. And then Michelle asked me to do this process. So I don't know.
Okay, so we had a motion, we had a second. Any discussion? Okay, do I hear any objection to approving the April 13th, 2022 minutes with suggested edits? Not, okay, not seeing any or hearing any, that will pass. So the last thing is communication. So Lisa, I know that you signed up to be the writer. We are in need of an editor. Any takers? Any takers?
And that editor should want to be willing to write for our next meeting,
Right.
correct? If we're following that.
Yep. Any editors? Come on, don't all jump at once. Come on. Well, you're thinking about that. So there was also a thing that wanted to bring in front of the board. Does the board want to put into the recap who spoke during public comment and what the topic was? Not saying what they did, just their name, and they spoke on X topic. Do board members want to include that in a board recap? If anybody would like to say something so we can get a sense, go ahead, Lisa.
I think it's a good idea. It's something we haven't done in the past, and I'm not really sure why, but I think it actually helps clue the public into what the community members are coming to us with. And then if they want to, go back and watch the taping of the meeting, they would be able to get the full gist of the message.
Go ahead, Ashley.
I just want to say I agree with Lisa on that. I think it also gives context when we look back historically of what happened at a meeting. If we don't mention it, it's sort of gone unless we're looking back. So I think we should.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I also think it shows some respect for the person from the public who's taken the time to come and talk to us, that we acknowledge that in our notes, our minutes.
Good point.
Teresa.
I happen to be looking through packets from a couple years ago, like up until like 2019, maybe even early 2020. We actually used to do that. So I don't know when it changed, probably COVID maybe. But it was a common practice that we used to do.
Go ahead.
I would say it's a great idea as well, just because there have been times when, as a community member, I wanted to try to go back to find a specific thing that somebody mentioned that I only remember partly, but I wanted to get clearer on it. And that would have been incredibly helpful to have that flagged, just for reference. So I think that's definitely a good idea.
Is there anybody that is not in favor of putting whoever spoke at public comment with just the topic, not editorializing it, just stating what the topic was? Okay, so if we all are good with that, then we can start doing that with that board recap. If there's no takers, go ahead, Lisa.
I was going to ask another question about communications for this week. So in the board report, or the leadership report this week, you gave us a good timeline on how we're going to be looking at the policy on prone restraints and seclusion that's been brought up several times. I think that would be a good thing for us to put into the recap so that the public's aware of that timeline if they missed the leadership report, even though we didn't really discuss it at the meeting. What do other people think about that?
Christine, go ahead.
The board, the recap is supposed to be about what happened at the meeting and what the board decided. And we haven't even voted whether we're going to take up this issue yet. That's for next one. And I think what you did is propose a way we can deal with it if the board agrees to do it, but the board hasn't even agreed to do it. So I think it would be out of turn to talk about it. And we didn't even talk about it at this meeting. So it's not a recap from this meeting. The only things that are supposed to be in a recap is what happened in the meeting.
I hear that. I also think that we do sometimes, in the past, we have added things that give context that we know that the public's kind of like aware of and wanting to know. So I'm just putting it out there.
I get that, but I'm saying we haven't even decided as a board whether we're going to take up the topic. And if we do take up the topic, how we're going to deal with it. So I'm not sure how you would put it in a recap. Does that make, I mean, I'm just saying, like, what are you going to say about it? Because we don't know what we're doing.
I was going to include what was in the leadership report, kind of the proposed timeline.
Teresa, do you have something to say?
Good way in Christine's direction. It's not part of the recap. Although anybody who's written to us, maybe you could add the section of the leadership report so that they understand that we are looking into this and they understand the timeline.
Just so you are aware, anybody who has emailed the Board of Recent about this, I have said that there is an agenda request and that all agenda requests, including this one, will be looked at the May 11th meeting by the full board. So anybody, just so you're aware, just anybody who has emailed on this subject. Do we want to put in about the open seats? So to just be aware that we still have the Duxbury seat and the Fayston seat. Go ahead, Cindy.
Kristen's request on Front Porch Forum, I did put an advertisement for the Duxbury seat and received no, I mean, and I don't believe Kristen or Bridget received anything either, but maybe again in another week or two, I'll just repost the same thing, the same wording. That wording seemed good, Kristen.
And I've just so everybody knows, I have been keeping in touch every time the due date has come up with the Duxbury Select Board. I've been keeping them in the loop, letting them know that nobody wants to come and hang out with us quite yet. Go ahead, Kelly.
Last year, or not last year, a few before town meeting, or maybe it was right after town meeting, I had sent a letter into the Waterbury Roundabout and just kind of gave my own perspective on just the experience that I have had so far as a board member. And it kind of generated some conversation and just, oh, okay, maybe I will apply to that open seat. So it's worth just maybe submitting your own personal touch to Front Porch Forum, or even submitting something to one of the local newspapers.
Letter. I thought your letter was good, and if you wouldn't mind, I could like change it around, I could make it my own, but if you would give me that to use as a template, it would be really helpful, and I'd be glad to do that to the, with the Duxbury flavor.
I'm just wondering if we can't find a person to fill this role. What are we supposed to do? Does anybody out there have advice of how it should be handled moving forward?
That was my next step. So yeah, because this will be the third round that we will be going for the Duxbury seat. I have to update the posting for a due date, all that stuff. But so yeah, I will be asking about that because it is the third go around, and we are getting towards, the end of the school board season. So yes, go ahead, Maddie.
I'm a resident of Duxbury, and I'm not sure if maybe it would be helpful if just start mentioning it to students to maybe tell their parents that it's available.
Absolutely. Spread the word. Come hang out with us on Wednesdays.
Okay.
Every other Wednesday, the second and the fourth. I mean, you could come hang out here, but nobody would be here every Wednesday, but the second and the fourth Wednesdays. Okay, so are we good with putting in the 2 open school board seats in the recap? Okay. I'll be the editor. Oh, Teresa, go ahead.
The public aware of my resignation, because I don't think it's been in the newspaper yet.
No, not yet, because that wasn't approved yet to put on the agenda. But yeah, so go ahead, Teresa, if you would like to. Teresa, go ahead.
Announce my resignation effective the close of the May 11th, 2022 meeting.
So we will start advertising for that as well. And hopefully, we'll get somebody for Teresa's seat. We do at our next meeting, we will be appointing somebody, hopefully, to the Waterbury seat. We do have one, we have one applicant person, so that's exciting. So are we good with putting those 2 open seats in the recap? Good? Okay. I'll be your editor, Lisa.
We're off our system a little, unless you're going to write it next time.
I can. That's fine. You need somebody, so I'll do it. Okay. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, I would be happy to be the editor, and I would also be happy to try to write the recap, but I'm brand new, so it would be awesome if I could have a wingman, wing person to help with that. I don't mind editing at all, and I don't mind writing.
Okay.
So I'm okay doing it. I just need somebody to touch base with.
Yeah. Do you want me to send you the spreadsheet? So if you want to sign up, you can.
So I did sign up
Oh, you
for
did?
one of the later meetings,
Okay.
so I'll just I'll switch to next week. I just would need.
Oh, I'm not on there. I did put my name on. That's weird.
Okay.
When you write, I'm happy to edit for you or like collaborate with you.
Okay.
The
That sounds
following.
good. Why don't we, you can put me in. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So what we've been doing is trying to have a seasoned board member kind of pair up with a new board member so that they can kind of guide them.
Yep.
And just so everybody knows, the board recaps should come back to me on Saturday at the latest. So she's going to do it with you, Lisa. Kim will. Okay. Go ahead, Cindy.
I'm going to be away for 6 weeks. I'm going to miss the next 3 meetings in person. I will be able to zoom in on them, but I didn't think it would work for me to do my first recap when I'm on the road. So I'll sign up for later in the year. That's all.
Okay. If there is nothing else, what time is it? If there's nothing else, I'd be looking for a motion. Seeing moves to adjourn. Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor? Okay. Meeting's adjourned. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.